And you know how I feel about those. All right. Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting online may use ActonTV's YouTube channel found at the top of the agenda. This meeting is also being recorded and will be posted on ActonTV's website at actontv.org. As a former teacher, I know well that educators design the first weeks of school to be foundational for the rest of the year. We see this in AB classrooms, where the beginning of the year is dedicated to establishing relationships between students and teachers, as well as routine, expectations, and yes, curriculum. Rapport and comfort develop alongside an introduction to the academic work. A school committee can mirror this same model. Last month, we got started in earnest with 3 meetings, 2 of which included workshops for goal setting and union negotiations. This month, we will do it again, 3 meetings, one of them in collaboration with the select boards and financial committees of both of our towns to talk about budget strategy. We are getting up and running, and these 2 months of school are designed to start the major deliverables of our work: writing a budget, evaluating the leadership of the superintendent based on the goals he has set for himself and the district, and writing policy that allows for effective and inclusive operation of our schools. We start today with the superintendent's district goals and the superintendent goals for the year. At our meeting on the 20th, we will discuss the superintendent evaluation process, our mechanism, which is our mechanism for holding the superintendent accountable for his work to us and to our constituents. On the 25th and into November, we will go all in on starting our budget, which is especially important work this year. I am aware of the pressing issues relating to our school district, and I believe that our SRO conversation deserves significant dedicated time, and I want to make sure it is done well with our full membership. I understand the gravity and urgency of this discussion, and I have read the reports released by Acton Police about the 2 dismissed officers, and I certainly have questions and concerns. We will have the first conversation about this as a public hearing during our December 1st meeting. Members of the public are invited to come and make their comments about the SRO program and if it should continue. The committee will listen, and then I will facilitate next steps from there. Until then, I'm grateful for the community's continued trust and patience. And with that, we are ready for public comment. Public participation. Per school committee policy BEDH, members of the public are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes regarding items that are not on the agenda. For items that are on the agenda, the public is asked to please wait for that item. The committee does not typically respond to comments during public participation. All right, seeing no comments, I am going to pass it off to Superintendent Light. Good evening.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Kyra, you just mentioned the word constituents, and I just want to point out in one of the coolest moments ever, the number of students in the audience actually outnumber the adults sitting and watching school committee meetings. So if there's any reminder of who the primary constituent we serve is, they're here tonight. We have our student reps who are going to give the first update of the year tonight. And then we also have 3 of our students in a poli-sci class at the high school who are observing. So be on your best behavior. And then we also have a special guest from RJ Gray as well. So welcome to all of you, and we're excited that you're here. I am just, for my update today, it's actually just more focused on some community things going on over the next couple of weeks that I'd like to point out to you. The big one that we're hosting is next Saturday, which is October 15th at 9:30 a.m. We are hosting the grand opening of the Boardwalk campus. That will include about a half hour of, the obligatory speeches by all of our politicians, followed by tours. And we're actually doing some student-led tours by our students at Gates and Douglas. We have some high school volunteers who are helping them out with that process. And then we also have some vendors from West Acton and some food trucks coming in to also be able to serve some food to the community and snacks and coffee and things like that. So we just want to make sure everyone in the community and school committee members know you are invited. If you have not yet RSVP'd to Julie LaLumiere, my admin assistant, please do. Not the public, just you. Public can just show up. But we're really excited to show off the new building to our community, and this is really a thank you to the community for, all of the support through that process. Diwali also is having a celebration. Their Diwali Fest 2022 is taking place over in Boxborough at the library, Sargent Memorial Library, right after our open house. So I would encourage all of you to, attend the open house first, and then at noon you can go over to the Sargent Memorial Library and learn about the history, culture, and traditions of our Indian community. So we welcome you to do that. Also, up this next weekend is a big weekend here, but on Sunday, October 16th, over at Leary Field, the annual event sponsored by our field hockey program is to support the Jimmy Fund and cancer awareness. So if you're around and you want to go to a great night game and catch some field hockey, 5:00 p.m. At the JV game, and 6:45 is the varsity game. So we would encourage you to attend that as well. I also want to just make a reminder out to you and all of our community, the vaccine boosters are now available. They are widely available. It's easy to schedule sessions for that. I got my vaccine and COVID and flu booster this past weekend. I did not have side effects other than almost getting a full night's sleep for a night. So that was wonderful. It was, I would do it every day if I could. And then we're just sending out, we continue to remind everyone about the community coffees that Kyra and I host together. So thanks, Kyra.
It is my pleasure to invite our high school representatives up to the microphone. So please say hello to Rohan, Harshini, and Molly. So welcome to our 3 student reps this year. They will be reporting at the first school committee meeting each month and will share some student perspective on current events at the high school. This is per our policy JIB, student involvement in decision making. Please tell me I got your names right. Please tell me I got your names right. Yes. All right, very good. Welcome, Mel.
As you may know, the school has a firewall that prevents students from searching up non-educational related websites or terms. An example of this is the block on the keyword TikTok. Due to this blockage, many videos that are needed for class or class projects and presentations are blocked, resulting in difficulty in completing the project. Although I agree that the firewall is a good thing and a necessary factor in keeping students engaged, it needs to be updated to allow a more diverse learning experience. A friend of mine, Smira Dhananjaya, gave commentary on this issue. She said, "A lot of times when I'm creating academic work, I am unable to present videos and other forms of media that are very beneficial to my project because they contain keywords. But in fact, they are extremely relevant to what I am doing, and I feel as a student that my limitations are being damaged because I'm unable to procure an adequate supply of media for my academic projects, and therefore I think this needs to be fixed." Samira makes a good point here, and this statement encapsulates a lot of other informal responses I got relating to this issue as well. This firewall and ban on the keyword TikTok has been going on since I was in 8th grade. I am now in 10th. Another friend of mine, Evie Shoemaker, said, "It's super annoying because so many science and history-focused channels that we use in school often, such as the Amoeba Sisters, the History Channel, and even reputable news sources such as the Washington Post, have TikTok accounts that they now link in their video descriptions. This means that even if their video has nothing to do with TikTok, we can't watch any of their videos that mention their TikTok account in the description." The evidence Evie provides here is yet another example of frustration throughout the student body, not at the firewall itself, but at the limitations certain parts of it provide in our learning experience. With an updated firewall, students would be able to expand their learning while also staying away from unsafe or unnecessary sites. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. Hi, my name is Harshini Magesh, and I'm the newest student representative this year. And this year, I'm going to talk about the reimplementation of advisory this year. And This year, advisory has been re-implemented normally for the first time after the 2019 to 2020 school year. And a small change that we've made is the advisory is now comprised of different age levels and with different grade levels. And there are differing student opinions regarding this change. So a lot of students feel that advisory provides a nice break in their day and it takes their mind off of a lot of difficult classes, and that the differing age groups gives them a chance to interact with people who they normally wouldn't have a chance to talk with. On the other hand, some people are not too fond of this like mixed age advisory, as a lot of people want to be with the kids in their grade so that they can connect with them better, because usually during advisory we're talking about topics like how stressful school is or what type of homework we get, and students feel that it would be better and for them to connect if they could be with students of the same grade level. And I think this awkwardness also comes from how rigid and formal advisory has become this year, compared to previous years where we had more autonomy, where students got to do different activities from coloring to playing games, whereas this year all teachers are doing the same exact activity every single week, and all the teachers are doing the same exact thing, making advisory monotonous. So while advisory should be a time to regroup and relax, it has become really formal, which defeats its purpose of building community. So while the reintroduction of advisory is beneficial, I believe that it can be better if students were allowed to brainstorm the types of activities they want to participate in, because going out of the classroom as well, they want to reinforce the idea of community building. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So quickly before I begin, I wanted to add on to Molly's point about the firewall. So as a senior, as seniors, Harshini and I are both applying to colleges, and one of the things that the firewall restricts is our personal emails. So there are certainly reasons why I think it makes sense. However, there's a lot of stuff that I run through my personal email, such as my college board account and actually networking with schools that are being impeded by the firewall. So I hope that gets addressed soon. And I know that wasn't the original intention, but hopefully that will be fixed. So now to this. So one of the things I do at high school is I'm one of the leaders of the ambassador program. So for those of you who don't know about the program, it's basically an opportunity for new students to link up with an upperclassman who will help guide them through their transition into AB. So most of our work takes place on the first day of school, and it's this big chaotic mess, but we tend to figure it out. However, this year in particular, we had a bunch of students come to school who were transfer students that A, either weren't in the system, or B, were completely, couldn't speak a word of English. And there wasn't any support really in the school for these students. And what ended up happening is, as ambassador leaders, we looked through all of our 150 or so ambassadors, and we tried to find students that were native speakers of Spanish or Portuguese. We were able to find a couple Spanish speakers, and they graciously volunteered their entire day to take those students through their classes, which, keeping in mind, they didn't have classes. They just kind of went from class to class, sort of emulating a school day. Meanwhile, they also didn't have an AB schools, and they weren't registered in the school at all. So ultimately, when I talked with them at the end of the day to hear about their experience helping these students, the one thing they kept mentioning was, how are these students going to get through a whole year like this? Especially when the ELL teacher can only communicate to them through Google Translate. And so I think that's unacceptable, and I want to propose a couple of solutions. They're not full solutions, but at least there's something. So I know you have previously discussed Superintendent Light's Welcome Center idea. the idea that we could have a place for new students to go to help set them up with these resources, their AB schools, a proper schedule, etc., to actually get them better, to improve the transition into the school. And this wouldn't just have to be for ELL students, it's all transfers. The second idea I want to consider is, just like those ambassadors showed, I think student groups can be a real part of helping new students transition into the high school. And especially for ELL students, we have a general program right now. It's called peer mentoring. So peer mentors are upperclassmen that are in classes of 9th and 10th grade classes they've already taken, and they help the teacher by modeling good student behavior and by being active participants. So if we go through our peer mentors and see which ones would be comfortable helping students who can't speak English get accustomed to the class, and we link up native speakers with the ELL students who both speak the same language, I think we can really improve the learning experience of ELL students. But ultimately, I don't think that these responsibilities should fall solely on the students. So I hope you'll consider future initiatives to support ELL and transfer students. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Actually, any questions for students before we move on?
Thank you for that. I'm just wondering, in addition to the firewall issue, I hear a lot about the lack of self-service altogether. And I hear that not only from students, but from parents and concerns about safety. And I just am wondering if you could just share your experiences with that since you're talking about it.
It was definitely a lot worse last year. Last year, it was like, I'd say, I don't know, 20% of our classes, the Wi-Fi wouldn't work, and it would just mess up the whole teacher schedule, and it would mess up like other classes too. But this year, it's been a lot better. I think I've only had one day where my Wi-Fi wasn't working, which is like a huge improvement on last year, and it's been really helpful because we've been able to stay on track and stay on schedule, which we weren't able to do last year. Personal Wi-Fi on phones doesn't always work, but obviously that's not the important thing. Wi-Fi on Chromebooks has been working a lot better. So,
Ginny, I can add a little bit to that too. You know, there were two issues we've seen at the high school. One is around Wi-Fi access, and the other is around cell service. And so, in terms of Wi-Fi access, we got caught in the supply chain crunch of the world because we had slated all of the wireless access points from the old Douglas and Gates schools, which were still very viable. They were relatively new, to actually go into the high school to make sure every classroom had its own Wi-Fi access point. However, as we were preparing to open the new building, the Wi-Fi access points that should have been delivered in May got backlogged until November. And so we had to have some Wi-Fi network in the new building to be able to open it. So we had to take the Wi-Fi access points out of the old Douglas and Gates schools, temporarily install them in Boardwalk, but then when we get the new access points, those will go into Boardwalk, and then we'll build out the rest of the high school network. So high school Wi-Fi will continue to improve over the course of the year, but we can't do anything about the supply chain delay and just got caught. The cell service is a different issue, because I heard that part of the question. Cell service, I don't think we're ever gonna have a district solution to that. The issue we have is this part of Acton does not receive sufficient cell coverage from Verizon. You know, Boardwalk campus actually is a significant concern for us because when you go into the building, there is zero cell service at all in the building. Now we have landlines for emergencies, but cell service is not gonna help. We explored possibly thinking about some kind of extender or something, just to do it for one network alone, like Verizon or AT&T, it's probably a couple $100,000 just for one school. We are not gonna have enough money any time in the budget that I can see in the foreseeable future to think about cell service. I think what we're gonna have to do instead, I've talked about teaming up with kind of our municipal responders to write a letter to Verizon and see if they might consider installing a cell tower in this part of the community. You know, we've tried that in the past. It has gotten some community pushback. I think, you know, this was well before my time, and I think there was concern at the time about having kids near cell towers and things like that. So it's not a slam dunk that that would happen. But I just want to, you know, acknowledge it is an issue. We get it. You know, we can't make calls either, even in situations that we need to make calls. But we probably will not be able to solve that on our own. It's probably going to require Verizon to do something.
Okay, because I just want to say that one of the most frequent comments I heard around the whole lockdown situation were parents who could not reach their kids and felt like, you know, I mean, it's one thing, you know, at an elementary school when, you know, the teachers are in charge and have landlines and can push out messages, but when, you know, you get, you know, information like that and you can't reach your kid, I mean, obviously it's very stressful and concerning. So that's just a widespread community concern. I don't know anything about technology, but I'm reporting that I have heard that like dozens of times.
Definitely completely agree.
Peter, quick question. Has the administration reached out to the Department of Public Utilities regarding the degradation of cell phone service in the area? I can tell you just from my own experience living, you know, on Concord Road, in the last 2 years, we've seen a huge degradation in service going from, you know, strong 5G down to like 4G, like LTE service. So I'm not sure if you folks have reached out to them regarding just the ongoing issues that we've had with cell phone service, in particular to the schools.
Yeah, I can give you my basic understanding of how the networks work. And most of the networks are out now phasing out their 3G service. As you move from 3G to 4G LTE to 5G service, I believe they operate on different frequencies. And while the newer services provide a much faster access, they have a poor range. The range is not as good and they don't penetrate buildings as well. And so I believe, and I say believe because it's only a belief, it's not a fact, I believe that the degradation of service you're seeing is that, you know, my gut is the cell carriers don't still have the infrastructure to truly have built out the networks that we all were told that they had. But I believe Andrew probably has more information on that.
I know about the technology of this. In a previous life, having to figure out how to get cellular service into big box retail stores, which are effectively built as Faraday cages, knocking out all the cell service. There are ways of being able to put repeaters in, but more importantly, the 5G technology and further allow for smaller portable antennas, or rather smaller footprint antennas. We have municipal buildings, and cell companies will pay money to rent municipal buildings, especially ones that are higher than the places around it. The opportunity for us to be able to contract with Sprint or T-Mobile and Verizon and AT&T could become not only a way for us to extend our cellular compatibility and 5G data, but also generate some additional revenue for the district or the community. It's not, can we please, it's hey, do you want? And I think we've got an opportunity here to be able to do something that'll be better for the schools. One thing to remember, even with this type of cell technology, the more cell phones are active, the lower bandwidth exists. So the more people are trying to use it, the more it kind of sucks up everything. But there are ways of mitigating that with multiple repeaters that are already in the schools. There are ways around this that the cellular companies monetize the ability to solve this problem. It makes money for them, it makes money for us. We should get in touch with all of the carriers.
Yeah, if you have a contact, I would love it, because when we tried that, they wanted a few $100,000 from us.
Oh, yeah, no, tell them they're wrong. But yeah, I'll help you with this, Peter.
I don't know what happened to this meeting. It just turned into something else. Okay, brilliant. What? I heard there were landlines in one place and repeaters in another. That's what I got out of that. But we are doing, yes. So what we are going to do now is take some presentations from multiple leaders in our special education community, starting with Director of Special Education, Jen Treslow. Did I get your last name right? Did I pronounce that right? Yes, I'm doing well tonight. Thank you so much for coming, Jen. And we have other special guests who we will introduce as we go.
See, Jen, I was trying to get you off the hook by just going right through the agenda quickly.
And it would have happened if I was so confused about the cell phone thing, but we're good now. We are on track.
Quite all right. All right. Well, I was remembering that the last time I was here was actually when I accepted the position, so it's nice to be back. Thank you so much. And to be joined by my friend Dave Fertolino. Come closer, sorry. Okay. All right, is that better? Okay. All right, thanks, Coach. Well, thank you very much for inviting me tonight to share with you what is happening in the special education department. We have a great team of administrators, teachers, and related service providers that are doing outstanding work with students. Tonight, I plan to share with you the laws that guide our work, what special education services and programs are in the district, including an update on co-teaching, the district's current status with disproportionality. Dave will share a little bit of budget information, and I'll share some information about some upcoming reviews that we have. So these are the federal and state laws that guide our work with students with disabilities and their families. The federal law, IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is our primary law that oversees a number of areas. The primary area that one of the primary areas that we consider is that all students have the right to a free and appropriate public education. Sorry, there's a mosquito right there. Okay, sorry. Keep going. And has the right to the same education as a student without a disability and the services needed to support their learning at no cost to them, and that is what FAPE stands for. The services are outlined in their IEP or their individualized education program. As part of IDEA, students with disabilities also have the right to learn and participate in school in the least restrictive environment, or LRE, which means alongside their peers as much as possible with the supports and services in place. We are also guided by the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which is actually a civil rights law. It protects qualified individuals from discrimination based on their disability. It also guarantees accommodations to provide equal access to education. At the state level, we have our Chapter 71, which is the Massachusetts version of IDEA, and also known as Chapter 766. And then 603 CMR 28.0 is all the regulations set by the state that we have to follow when implementing special education programs and services. So I'm going to briefly describe the services and programs we provide for students with disabilities in AB, beginning with our youngest learners. So state and federal laws require that all districts support students with disabilities beginning when they turn age 3. In AB, we have our early childhood program at the Boardwalk campus, which if you haven't visited yet, please go visit because it's unbelievable and it's just terrific. The teachers are so happy and the kids are just doing great. So our students are supported in inclusive classrooms with non-disabled peers, and we also have programs for students with autism that require instruction utilizing the principles of ABA, or applied behavior analysis. Some students who are age 3 to 5 also join us specifically only for related services. So they might come in just for speech, just for PT, or just for OT. We're currently serving over 100 students, age 3 to 5 right now, but at the end, that they can join at any time. When they turn 3, they can join our program and start receiving services. So many relationships with families start much earlier when kids are transitioning to us from early intervention providers. Joe and his team are seeing similar trends as many other districts are, with young students coming to us with more complex needs, and students joining us with very limited social experiences as a result of the pandemic. So next I'll be going over briefly the services and programs we have for students beginning when they enter kindergarten in AB. And with this graphic, you'll be able to see how students with disabilities may move through the range of environments based on team decision making. Our least restrictive environment is when students are fully in their grade level classrooms. Oh, there we go, okay. Receiving push-in and pull-out supports, and this is happening at all grades in all schools. So services in the Learning Center include academic instruction, speech and language, OT, PT, and related services. The majority of students on IEPs in our district receive their services via the Learning Center model. We are also engaging in co-teaching, which is when a general education teacher and a special education teacher deliver instruction together. It is the least restrictive approach to providing special education services. Students with disabilities learn alongside their peers and may receive additional services both in or out of the classroom. We're continuing to build our capacity in all of our schools. So you can see where co-teaching is currently happening with the goal to continue to increase this model where appropriate for students. I'll now briefly go over the specialized programs that we have within the district, beginning with our Language and Beyond program. And this is a program for students with language-based learning disabilities, including dyslexia. We have this program at Douglas, R.J. Gray, and at the high school. Students receive small group instruction in language arts, reading, math, and speech and language services are an integral part of this program. Currently, in addition to that, many students receive some supports in executive functioning and work production, especially as students get older and start to move into the secondary grades. And we're currently supporting about 30 students, K to 12, in this model. And in general, it starts about second or third grade at the Douglas School. Our next program is Connections, formerly known as Bridges at the high school, but it's Connections K to 12. And this is a program for students on the autism spectrum who require academic, social pragmatics, executive functioning, and behavioral supports. Connections is at the Conant School, it's R.J. Gray, and at the high school. And currently most of our students are participating in full inclusion, but there are some students within Connections who do partial inclusion depending on their student need and on their IEPs. And K to 12, we are serving approximately 77 students across the district in this program. I'm going to keep going, we've got lots of programs. Our Compass program is for students with emotional impairments. This program is at McCarthy Town, R.J. Gray, and at the high school. Students' IEPs include academic supports, counseling, pragmatics, and support with behavioral regulation. Our K to 12 programs, Compass program, is currently supporting about 48 students across the district. We also have our Pathways program, which is at Blanchard School. And this is additionally for students on the autism spectrum, but it's for students who require significant academic modifications and behavioral support. Some students also require discrete trial and direct instruction utilizing the principles of ABA instruction as well. It is substantially separate for some students with inclusion opportunities, and inclusion opportunities increase as their independence increases as well. Our program currently has 24 students at Blanchard, and we are looking forward to expanding to R.J. Gray next year, and planning for that has begun. Just the last few programs that we have at the secondary level is our Secondary Transition Education Program, also known as STEP, at R.J. Gray. And this is a program for a small group of students with intellectual impairments. They do receive specialized instruction in small groups, and they are going into inclusive classrooms. Their focus on their IEPs is on academics, life skills, and participating in community-based learning. Our occupational development program at the high school is for students with moderate to intensive needs. Students also receive small group instruction, but they are going into inclusion classes across the content areas. And our last program is our PACE program, which stands for Practical Academics and Community Education. Under IDEA, districts are required to support identified students until they turn 22 with transition services based on individual needs to support their transition to post-school activities. In AB, this program, students have vocational experiences with job coaching, and they also are working on life skills. So even with all the supports that AB has to offer students with disabilities, there are times when students' needs cannot be met in the district. And students may need to go out of district to receive those supports. This is determined through a team meeting that includes the parents, school staff, and the student when appropriate. At this point, Matt Kidder, who is our out-of-district coordinator, will join the team and support the student and family through the process of identifying the appropriate school setting. Matt maintains a close relationship with families and students and the schools that they attend. He attends meetings and observations and does lots of communication with families and schools. The district does provide transportation to all students who are placed out of district. We currently have about 73 students, and they are attending school within collaboratives, day schools, and residential placements. So just to reiterate, AB is able to support students in many different ways, and FAPE and the least restrictive setting is not the same for all students. Out of district is considered most restrictive because a student may not be with any same-aged peers without disabilities at all during their school experience. So switching gears a little bit, now I'll be sharing some information with you about district-level work for our students with disabilities. So as has been mentioned in several meetings prior, AB was identified as being disproportionate in identifying African American and Black students as having a communication disability over a period of 3 years. The state keeps track of student identification and placement as a way of monitoring educational access and equity for marginalized students, especially students with disabilities. As a result, inequities are identified and districts must respond. In AB, our data found that an African American Black student was 3 times as likely to be identified with a communication disability as a white student over a 3-year period. So as a result, we were identified and had to create an action plan. Prior to our action plan, we had to review data and do a deep root cause analysis. What it revealed was that we had not built enough capacity in our beliefs, skills, tools, and practices for general educators to be able to support every student in their general education classroom. We had a lack of consistent MTSS that included tiered interventions, progress monitoring, and an instructional support team in our schools. And lastly, we identified there were gaps in evidence-based literacy instructional materials and practices. And so we had to develop an action plan and submit it to the state as to how we as a district would address these issues. Our action plan included the MTSS work that started last year and is being rolled out in elementary schools this fall. We provided responsive classroom trainings for over 60 educators this summer, which I know you learned about at the last meeting, but that training provides teachers with a lot of strategies and tools to support all students in their classrooms. We're also bringing Jessica Minahan into the district to support our IST, our instructional support teams, with struggling students by identifying and teaching underdeveloped skills. And lastly, we were doing literacy work, and we're working with our literacy coaches and teachers to implement a structured core literacy curriculum specifically focusing on vocabulary, comprehension, and word studies. The good news is that we just recently found out that we are no longer disproportionate in any area. So this indicates that the work we have started is showing some progress for the students, for supporting all students in our district. So that was some terrific news. All right, this is just a slide to give you a general picture of the number of students on IEPs over the past 5 years as of June 30th of that year. In 2018, we were at a high of 977 students, and last year, as of June 30th, we had approximately 888 students on IEPs. The numbers have decreased over the years, similar to the trends that we've seen in our decrease in enrollment. So now I'm going to turn this over to Dave Rodolino for some, I'm going to do it, yeah. But I'm also going to do it.
Thank you. So just a couple of slides to put some dollars behind what Jen just talked about. This slide was from the FY23 budget material. three lines on there, blue, red, and green. And just reminders to all, the blue is the gross cost. So how much is the tuition charge for our out-of-district tuitions, for out-of-district students, I mean, during the period from full regionalization. And you can see that the trend, especially in the last couple of years, has gone down. We could not, with certainty, predict that in FY 18 and 19 and 20, when we were bringing on additional special education teachers, that this would be the result. We hoped it would. It was done for the purpose that Jen talked about before, least restrictive environment and FAPE, but the byproduct, and a happy one, seems to be that we have stemmed the tide of tuition going up, and we are serving a lot more students in-house, which is at a much lower cost. There'll be some not so good news in a couple slides, though. The red line represents how much we budget for circuit breaker. So the difference between the cost of the tuitions, the blue line, and how much we fund out of the operating budget, the red line, that amount is the amount of budgeted circuit breaker. If you can see, the disparity between the blue and the red has grown a little bit. We have increased the amount of circuit breaker reserve used in setting the budget, just like E&D. It has trended up in order to get the budget to where it needed to be. And the green line, so far, we've kept the balance pretty high. We're still over $2 million in the bank for circuit breaker reserve, and we've done this by underspending the circuit breaker amount budgeted. This reserve has a cap. It has to be spent within 1 year. You can see the comment on the bottom. We got $3.3 million last year. We ended with $2 million, so we did spend some of what we got last year. My target, best practice, if you will, is to consistently try and retain all of 1 year's reimbursements for use in the following year budget. We're getting a lot closer. We were at $1 million when at full regionalization. We've used more circuit breaker to fund the budget, but we've increased the balance at the end of the year. This is a quick analysis of year-to-year data for out-of-district students and the related tuition costs. We had several very high-cost students both move out of the district and well, they did one or the other. These are some students that were tuitioned out. The families moved out of the district, and in some cases, the students returned to the district. So you can see from the light blue line, the number of out-of-district student placements has gone down. Now, in Jen's slide, she said we're now at 73. We were about 65 when we did the budget last year, last December. And I know, because Jen usually comes down and tells me so, we've added some more students that have gone out of district. I work with Jen and Matt, and we'll project what we think is going to happen for tuition costs with my quarterly reports. And then lastly, this news is pretty hot off the press, and just take in the data on this slide for a second. So the first bar is an average increase. Let me start again. OSD approved rate increases. OSD is the Operational Services Division. It's a state agency, and they approve rate increases for private schools to provide special education services. The average over a 10-year period was less than 2. 21-23 averaged about 2 each year. The average that was approved for FY24 is 14%. 14% is the total, not the average, but the total of those first 10 years that I've depicted on this graph. Before I had some additional information, I rather snippily wrote, unlike the foundation budget, which is capped at 4.5%, there isn't a statutory cap for private rates, hence a 14% increase is basically communicated to us in an it is what it is manner. Most recently, and by that I mean an email yesterday, the 14% is broken down between a 5% inflation factor. I certainly can't argue with that based on economics, and a 9% workforce stability factor, something brand new. The 14% increase is what we will be using to determine the cost of tuitions for the students that are presently in the district for next year's budget. So that number has Jen's and my and Peter's attention. It's just being explained now, so I don't have anything yet to add about it, what this workforce stability factor specifically relates to. I know that like school districts, private schools did get some COVID relief money, and that's being proposed as one of the reasons they need this big increase, because the relief money no longer exists, and there's the dreaded funding cliff. I'll have more information as it becomes available and relevant.
All right. Well, so to move on, we are going to be conducting several reviews this year. So based on the number of transitions in the special education leadership over the past 5 to 7 years and feedback that we've received to these changes, we've engaged with some consultants to conduct a review of the special education administrative structures. We are working with Dorsey Yearly, who's the former executive director of EDCO and a retired special education director in Wellesley, and Christine Brumback, who is the retired special education teacher in Needham. They will be joining the district in October, interviewing administrators, teachers, and assistants, and touring buildings. They're also going to be looking at our use of special education assistants, as those numbers have increased as well. The district is also participating in its tiered focused monitoring on-site visit in December. So DESE reviews districts regularly to ensure compliance in special education, English language education, and civil rights. The team will be in the district to review records, conduct interviews, and possibly tour buildings. They will also be sending out a parent survey to parents of students on IEPs and conducting a parent orientation at our November SEPAC meeting, which is a perfect segue to conclude this presentation as the district continues to collaborate closely with our ABCPAC. We meet monthly with the board to discuss various issues impacting families. We attend the CPAC meetings with our families, and we partner for presentations, such as our basic rights trainings for parents through the Federation for Children with Special Needs. Thank you again for this opportunity to share all that our department is involved with this year, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
Questions, friends?
I don't have a question about tuitions, but I definitely have a concern about tuitions. So I'm concerned that the approved tuitions are going up by 14%, and it's clear that it is what it is kind of situation. I guess my question would be, would we expect at least the circuit breakers to go up proportionally, the circuit breaker funds we receive to go up proportionally as well?
Yes, but the circuit breaker is a typically 75% reimbursement. So as your costs go up, your reimbursement goes up. That's assuming that all of these 14% increases are applied to students that meet the threshold for circuit breaker reimbursement to begin with. The but is circuit breaker is a reimbursement program. So while we will have to budget for these costs in FY24, we won't get the circuit breaker reimbursement until FY '25. I've proposed this to some industry people. I think it's not rocket science that with the state having a fair amount of cash on hand, that one thing could be to accelerate what's called the Extraordinary Relief Program, and provide same-year funding for an increase of this magnitude. And anything's possible. I think that's the most common sense way to try to buffer this at the district level.
Just to add on to that, I always think it's important to note that we shouldn't be concerned about a 14% increase in tuition if that's what kids need for the programs. What we should be concerned about is that there's not a parallel increase for school districts to be able to offset that. So just to make sure we frame that and keep coming back to that idea.
Okay, so I will ask my dyslexia question. So I don't really understand the lab program because I work with lots of families of kids who have dyslexia, and my understanding is that the lab program really isn't mostly for kids that have dyslexia, and that it's more like a deeper dive communication disabilities or overarching deeper language disabilities that might come with dyslexia too, only because there's lots of families that say, oh my God, my student's dyslexic, and they're really not getting what they need in school, because my understanding is that most dyslexic students are receiving services in the least restrictive environment in a learning center, which is as it should be, or a co-teaching model or whatever. Dyslexia is not one of those things where most kids need to have, a separate learning situation. I understand that, but could you just explain the lab program a little bit more?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we recognized that our lab program was not as robust as we would like it to be. And last year, we brought a teacher. Our plan was to continue the program at Douglas, and we had a plan for 2 special education teachers to be teaching within the lab, the Language and Beyond program at Douglas School. We did extensive work with special education teachers, the speech pathologist, and a team including our speech pathologist at Douglas, but then also brought in some people from R.J. Gray as well, and we did some summer work and really took a deep dive into thinking about the curriculum that we're working, the methodologies. Knowing that some of the students who are in the program have a profile that requires those services, but they also have some additional needs as well. Unfortunately, the second teacher that we had hired pulled out about 3 days before school started. And we have been able to hire a special education teacher, but she doesn't have the depth of knowledge and instruction that we had anticipated. As a result, our special education teacher, who does have the background, is providing a lot of the services, and we're continuing the work. So we are looking at the methodologies, we're looking at where are the opportunities for co-teaching, and really working with our speech and language pathologists to really integrate and do some co-teaching there within their learning centers to really provide those services. But it is still a building year because we had one plan in place and did not anticipate having to not have what we wanted.
Just ask a follow-up question. So, we've made a huge effort in improving Tier 1 instruction within the classrooms and all of that, and increasing the knowledge of our regular education teachers. Are we also increasing the knowledge of the special education teachers to provide those intervention services for the kids that really do need it, who are in regular education classrooms and just receiving support through learning centers?
Yeah, so as we've talked about before, we do have Melissa Orkin in the district who is doing a lot of work with our general education teachers, and our special education teachers are doing that work alongside. We also are we've sent a lot of teachers for Orton Gillingham and our Wilson training as well, to build upon, again, the students are getting foundations in the gen ed setting, but also to be able to build on our work in that area. The special education teachers are also working alongside their gen ed teachers, looking at the curriculum that we mentioned earlier with the vocabulary development comprehension in complex text. So yes, I would say we're working on that, and we're really excited about what's going to be happening in the district this year for both our gen ed and our special ed teachers.
Any last questions before I move us along? All right, I thank y'all. Who's next? Peter. Who? Amanda. Hello, Kyra. Welcome, y'all. It is always good to have SEPAC leaders here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. It feels like we were just here at the end of last spring, but again, I'm Kyra Lafferty, and this is...
My name is Amanda Bailey, and we're both co-chairs of the Acton-Boxborough Special Education Parent Advisory Council. And I just want to say just quickly, just to follow up just on what was just discussed and sort of set the framework for what we're going to talk about tonight. Inclusion isn't an opportunity. We frame it as an opportunity. It's not. Inclusion is an act. It's not an opportunity. Inclusion is also not dependent on independence. So as we look at the assistants, as we look at special education paraprofessionals, we need to bear that in mind, that independence is not a requirement for being included.
Again, our organization represents families of children in the district with disabilities. We are a creature born out of state law. We do our best to advise the district on matters that pertain to the education and safety of students with disabilities, creating the programs, implementing the programs, and giving whatever feedback we can along the way to make everyone's lives better, easier.
So to that end, we conducted an annual survey. It's supposed to be done annually. DESE would prefer we do it that way. And our parent guardian survey had 3 main goals: to gather information from the entire community to facilitate participation and ensure that all children with disabilities are represented through our efforts. We fell short on this, we're going to talk about that. We're monitoring families' experiences with special education programming, as Kyra said, to provide feedback and guidance to the district. And we're also following up on issues previously identified through surveys, feedback forms, and anecdotal reporting. The survey had 20 questions with several open-ended response options and demographic questions, which we're going to talk about next. We netted 209 responses. This represented 183 students with IEPs or students with disabilities, if you're using the state label. This is 24% of the overall population for Acton-Boxborough as of October 1 last year. This is down from our 2017 survey rate. We had a 40% response for that, which indicates the need to rebuild a community and increase our outreach. This also encompassed students with 504 plans. While Jen is our primary contact with the district, our organization does represent students with disabilities, and that's those with IEPs, 504s, or those who have yet to be identified. This was the first time we translated the survey into languages other than English. We were able to secure translation in Chinese, French, and Portuguese. We were not able to get Korean and Spanish. And 3 of the 13 surveys were returned. We're missing people. We're missing people this way, so there's an opportunity. This is also our first time collecting race and ethnicity data per the DESE definitions. These following numbers are based on the total of IEPs plus 504s we got in response out of the total number of IEPs based on the 810 head count. You can see the discrepancies here. It's actually even bigger. The gap is even bigger if we factor in the number of 504s. We don't know that number. We're talking to Jen Faber about getting those statistics over time. We're responsible for these. So we need to talk next. We're going to talk about what we've done so far this year to improve our outreach, but this is very much in the front of our minds that we're not representing everyone. And then when we talk about satisfaction, or we talk about people who agree or disagree, that this is going to vary greatly, and we can't go into intersectionality and subgroup experiences without more information. Survey responses by disability type. We took 504s out to calculate this. You can see where we are representing people and where we are missing people again. Developmental delay is a disability category that only goes through age 9. It's often found in the preschool. Same thing with communication. We often see kids with communication disabilities at the preschool as well as autism. So we know that actually we did not hit as many early childhood families as we need to. Kyra, talk about what we've done so far.
This year, we've started resource tables at the back to school night and the early childhood program. What this looks like is Amanda and myself, or Abe Gutierrez, who cannot be here tonight, or a few other SEPAC parents will set up a table and interact with folks as they're coming into the buildings for the back to school nights. It's been a lovely opportunity to see and meet principals in the action, see and meet school psychologists in action. It's been fantastic. We've, gotten the flavor of every different school. McCarthy Town, my children's school, have to brag on them, was the one school that had a translator right at the front table. There was translation services available. It was the only school I've been doing this for maybe 5 or so years. Amanda.
It's the first time we've ever been described in Portuguese, I will say.
Yes. So fantastic. We've reached out to all the special education coordinators, and some of whom are here tonight. We met with them at one of our CPAC meetings. Almost all of them attended a CPAC meeting at 7:30 p.m. on a weeknight, which is difficult for everyone, particularly those that have been in that school building since 7 a.m. that morning. It's lovely to see them. We've hosted also the Fine Motor Chair was able to attend that CPAC meeting. We have made contact with the different PTOs, and we are, going over details to present some inclusion opportunities or inclusion guidance to the PTOs that are planning activities, events that are sometimes difficult to include some children. We have met with the absolutely fabulous new director of DEI to discuss 504s, our difficulties with accessing translation services for things like our survey that Amanda is going to give way more details on soon. And, to partner with Jen Faber, the new DEI director, on inclusion opportunities down the road. I feel like this will be a fantastic partnership that we're excited to start.
So we're going to dive into some very data-heavy slides that you haven't seen. So we're going to make sure this is available to you, and I want to note that our full report will be published next week. We will make sure that you have it. We will make it available on our website as well. This first slide, we wanted to know more about collaboration with the teams and how people feel that they're heard or not by staff when interacting at the IEP table, or if that their input is given consideration. And by and large, people who responded to the survey did feel that they are heard and valued as team members. They did value, in particular, more proactive communication in the day-to-day, and in the open-ended responses, we noted people really do want to hear from related service providers more, that the special educators are very responsive, but maybe not so much with their related service providers working with their kids. And there are ways to increase the communication there. Culture. This is a question that we've asked in every survey since time out of mind. I feel I can speak freely with district staff and disagree with my students' special education program or services without negative consequences. We note that over 80% agree with this statement somewhat or strongly. It's been called out in the past that 1 in 10 parents, guardians, continues to disagree with this statement. That number has held over time. That number has held through multiple special education directors. It's actually come down a little bit. So we do monitor this. I think it really speaks to, again, a culture of openness, and we'll continue to monitor this. But again, until we have more data for more subpopulations, it's really hard to say. People feel comfortable. People feel safe. Staff understanding of student disabilities. So we wanted to know, when we're setting up a culture of belonging and inclusion, what people thought about general education staff's understanding of their students' disability-related needs. Parents and guardians of children with autism and specific learning disabilities who answered the survey were most likely to both agree and disagree with this statement. Autism in particular was 30% of the responses on both sides of that scale. Open-ended questions revealed that ADHD was also of particular concern here. The not applicable number there on the right, that refers to students in out-of-district placements, as Jen was referencing, who may not have access to general education staff simply by nature of their placement. Social emotional needs. 70% who answered the survey agree somewhat or strongly that their student has the appropriate support, peer groupings, and services necessary to meet social and emotional needs. We're talking about co-teaching tonight. We've talked about, lots of gen ed initiatives to help with this. We want to remember that these are the kids who have already been identified as having issues in these areas. Autism, again, featured prominently, 30% on both sides. Over 50% of respondents, 56%, agreed somewhat or strongly that they worry about their student being bullied, teased, or harassed due to their disability. We asked this question to follow up on persistent anecdotal reporting, as well as listening session feedback from the listening sessions we conducted with Jen last fall with all the different age populations across the district. We then broke this out by disability type to see more about who is particularly expressing these kinds of concerns. Obviously, it's not acceptable for anyone, but we also found in open-ended responses that the recess and the bus are two particular areas that parents worry about. Can we talk about paraprofessional? Private therapies. I want to preface this slide by saying that special education is not about best. It is about what's appropriate. And the appropriate amount of service for an individual student to make effective progress will vary. And we've heard a lot about parents who don't want their kids to fail. They want to supplement. They do not want to wait for their child to fail to prove that they need additional help from the school. We know anecdotally that many families, as Tess already noted, are pursuing outside services. We found that over half of the people who responded to our survey, at least 57%, are supplementing with some kind of private therapy to support their child's disability-related needs. There are discrepancies by disability type, which we're going to talk about next. But this raises questions regarding equity, adequate in-school service provision, and progress monitoring, because if people are artificially boosting their IEP data, are they getting what they need in school to make progress, or is this being inflated elsewhere? We also worry about who is accessing what. There are major equity questions around this. By disability type, we want to call it a couple of these findings. Autism, that amount of private therapy for families of kids with autism is almost to be expected because of the nature of the disability. Students with autism often have trouble generalizing skills across settings. They may learn it very easily one-to-one in a small group, but then when we take them out in the community, our kids may struggle more. So we would expect to see private therapy for that particular disability type. The emotional category is correct. I checked it 3 times. All but one of the reporting families said that their students in the emotional disability category were receiving outside therapy and services. Specific learning is also over 50% of those respondents. And then the one over here on the right, we did ask this about 504 plans too. 504 plans are not bound by these 10 disability categories in IDEA. They can be any disability type. But that half of the families whose kids are receiving accommodations or related services are supplementing outside is something that we need to look at a little more closely. And again, we had very few 504 responses. We don't have access to that list the way that we do the students with IEPs. We also don't know the total head count of students with 504s, but it's way more than 26. So again, this is a tiny sample. COVID impact. Anecdotally, a lot of families were confused about COVID compensatory services. Their kids didn't receive COVID compensatory services. So we asked whether or not they felt their student was provided the appropriate level of COVID compensatory services to address any regression or new needs arising from the pandemic. The state, the federal government, they all issued a lot of guidance around what was COVID compensatory and how kids were to qualify. IEP teams were required to discuss this. Again, we've got a discrepancy here by those who agree and disagree. This is subjective. But what was concerning is that in some of the open-ended responses, we found people didn't know what this was. The team had never discussed it. They brought it to the team, and the team didn't know what it was. This is also maybe driving some of the previous private therapies to catch kids up. So we do want to monitor that over time. Why does this matter to you all? We want to know if the programs and initiatives the district has in place are having the right outcomes. We want to be able to share families' experiences and make sure that their voices are heard as they are equal members of the IEP process. What helps our students with disabilities helps all students. And we really do want to look at this culture of inclusion. As a result from the survey, or as a result of the survey findings, as well as other conversations, we've developed the following preliminary priorities. These have not been approved by the membership because we've had one meeting and it was taken up a lot of conversation about the MOU. We are going to continue to monitor those discussions among your subcommittee and among yourselves. There were many concerns expressed by families of students with disabilities. The language in the new MOU specifically addresses students with IEPs and 504s, requires families be given the option to share their student's IEP or 504 with the SRO. So there was a really robust discussion about that. We're going to be participating in the Department of Education's tiered focus monitoring process, as Jen mentioned. We're going to be following up on issues identified in this survey. So what we didn't talk about tonight, extended school year eligibility, power school access, which we've already raised with Jen. SEPAC outreach, we got a lot of feedback there, especially around community building. We're going to be conducting a listening session for parents and guardians of students with autism, just as we did for parents and guardians of students with dyslexia. There were enough findings to warrant having a broader conversation among that community. I get to facilitate it. It's going to be a nightmare. But we are looking forward to it. We intend to conduct another survey in spring 2023, and of course we're going to provide our education on basic rights and other topics as we go on. Oh, and there's a new IEP form coming, apparently, Jen. So we have to wrap our heads around that too. Go ahead, Kyra.
And here are our meeting dates. We're doing our best to accommodate folks that would like to meet in person and connect in person, but also offer Zoom opportunities, as it is a bit easier for some folks to connect that way. As you can see, there's a meeting each night. And thank you so much, Jen Treslow. It's been wonderful working with you. Jen Faber has been a delight to meet. Thank you, Peter, for everything that you do for our families. We really appreciate it. Any questions?
Questions, y'all? Do you have one, Anna?
I do. Thank you very much. Found the survey data really interesting, really helpful. I had some thoughts about in particular the private therapies, because you talked about that in terms of sort of equitable access to opportunities for our kids, and that some people may have the ability to get additional access. I think, though, it might be good to dig a little bit deeper into that, because clearly there are other forms of funding to get access to those types of therapies. So I think to dive into this more, I'd love to know, are you funding that personally? Is that funded through insurance? Are there grants? And then additionally, because you sort of opened that door, then there's a great opportunity here to ask families, are you aware of additional funding opportunities? It took me about 3 years to figure out the Mass Health system and whether or not it would work for us. But I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and I saw that you just came out. There's a good learning opportunity with ERICA, which is the Massachusetts law requiring insurances supporting behavior therapies and other therapies for students and children with autism. So I think the private therapies in particular, because the other thing that we look at that, when we consider that broadly for the school district for students who aren't on an IEP, some families have the means and the desire to take extra tutoring on. And so I think it's important to recognize that some families will have that opportunity here. And so it's not necessarily sort of that they're not getting the services that they may need at school. So I think diving into that some more to understand would be really helpful.
I just want to point out, though, too, that when we are, and see if this resonates, hopping in the car after school and racing off to go to speech therapy or OT or psychologist, to go see a psychologist, or into Boston Children's, we are narrowing our children's worlds and our worlds. This is a very lonely journey, and it's a very isolating journey, too. And we're not doing the tutoring, we're not doing the enrichment, we're not engaging in those inclusive opportunities in the community to be seen as members when people are doing this on the back end. So you're right, I think we do need more information about what's going on here to be able to talk about it more fully.
Thanks. And I've just got one more quick comment, which is around inclusion, because you mentioned at the beginning, you just mentioned it now. I think it's really important to tie inclusion with the concerns around bullying, right? So the more that our kids can be included in a general education setting and in multiple settings with their peers, the less likely they are to experience bullying, because that diversity will be normalized amongst, you know, our students' peers. And I think it's really important to identify that inclusion is not just about a great experience for our kids, but it's a great experience for all of our kids, so that everybody is treated, you know, the full diversity of our student body can be treated more equitably.
I'm mindful of the time, Madam Chair. But I did just want to say, too, that the classroom libraries and the efforts the district is making around co-teaching and the efforts being made around responsive classroom are all going to help with this, too.
Tessa and then Andrew.
Well, just quickly, when you said private therapies, you meant tutoring too, right?
Sure.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because
Areas by disability.
because when
specific
we're
learning.
talking about specific learning disabilities,
Yeah.
you're talking about private tutors that cost upwards of $75 an hour,
To learn to
2
read.
to 3 times a week.
To
So,
learn to read.
to learn to read. So when we're talking about equity, that is never covered by insurance, ever.
Wow. Andrew.
My question's not quite as groundbreaking as that one, but it has to do with number 6 that you had up there. And I'm curious about the negative reaction to speaking about services, and whether that some would agree is based on a bias for the service or relationship the family has with the service provider.
So we've had so much turnover that I think there's a lot of trepidation coming to the table. And we can go back and take a look at what that balance was over time, too. I think that sometimes, too, people have a really bad experience. And we're coming out of the pandemic where we had teachers doing heroic and valiant things, but things were so rocky that it's possible people are just hesitant right now. But if you have a bad experience, it's really hard to let that go. It's really hard to not carry that into the next team, the next school, the next district. And so we do try to help people reset with that. But this is definitely something, again, we've watched over time and we'll continue to look at.
We all set? All right, brilliant, thank you. Thank you always. Thank you always for coming. And thank you for the work you do for our families. Thank you. Yeah. And we'll make sure that the, that especially that slide with all of your meetings is shared. Okay. Hi, Peter. We are moving on to, we're going to do a first read on district goals, and then we are going to do a first read on superintendent goals. And I will remind those audience members that this is a major tenet of what we do as a school committee, which is to evaluate the superintendent, and we'll be talking more about that on the 20th. That this is the first step in that major process. So thank you very much, Peter. Let's get going.
All right, so this time I'm not going to feign walking out on a meeting, and I'm actually here with a purpose. So as we start talking about goals tonight, I just want to reiterate what Kyra said. These are part of the superintendent's evaluative process, and this is also an outline of the major work that we're undertaking as a district. This is the first year where I'm proposing the district goals, but there's also actual superintendent's goals. They overlap significantly, but there is a little bit additional in the superintendent's goals for the year beyond just the district goals. So just want to call that out. I want to start, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you all have seen this before. This is the district visualization of the district strategy and what we're working on. We have 4 main buckets that we've worked on: engaged learning, equitable opportunities and outcomes, social emotional learning, and inclusive practices. And we have continued to try and place relationships, climate, and culture at the center of our work. I looked at this. I have made 2 small adjustments to it. One is of substance, the other is just ornamental. And so this is the new version that we'll be publishing. We added the word belonging at the center of this. If you really think about much of the purpose of schooling and what leads to not only academic achievement, but a real feeling of being part of a culture, it's all about belonging. And so, it's certainly something that we've talked about a lot as a district over the last few years. And when it's not prevalent, it really, causes kind of our values to feel shaken. And so I wanted to make sure that we really cited belonging as a central theme of what's important to us as a district. And then I simply, matters less important, I just use the new logo at the center of it rather than an old one. So as we think to this year, and we've talked about this now multiple times with you as a committee, but there are 3 district goals. I'm also going to just talk very briefly about some additional priorities, which are just below what we would call a goal in terms of significance to us. We, in planning these, stayed very much thinking about continuing work that has been previously started as a district and made sure it all aligned with our strategy. We also have, in this set of goals, begun a gradual shift, and I've talked to you about this before, of trying to think about being outcome-focused as opposed to output-focused. There's always going to be a place for outputs, and they're important, especially as we get into trying to think of some of the softer skills that we do as a district. But we're also trying to make sure that we're having the impact we want through our programs by thinking about student outcomes. There are 3 overarching areas for the goals, as I've spoken with you before. One is around social emotional learning, mental and behavioral health. A second is around multi-tiered systems of support to improve our literacy and mathematics outcomes. And then the final is around culturally responsive practices. So looking at this, I just want to highlight how some of these goals fit into the strategy, just to make sure we all understand why we're really working toward this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the social emotional learning goal, and the work we're trying to do this year talks about belonging, relationships, climate, and culture, but also the academic integration of social emotional skills. You heard about that at the last meeting, particularly in the trauma-sensitive schools work, and work around responsive classroom, but also advisories is a core focus here. We have also been thinking about using the multi-tier systems of support that has been in development now for several years in terms of trying to shift our literacy and mathematics outcomes, and that certainly relies on having good, sound system of evidence-based screening and assessment. And we're also kind of working in that triangle of culturally responsive practice, which includes, certainly expanding the diversity of our workforce, making sure that we're providing culturally responsive, inclusive professional learning to all of our staff, and then that all of our materials that we use in classrooms, instructional practices, are aligned with best understandings of culturally responsive practices. So those are the 3 big areas I'm going to be talking about as we look at goals. And then some of the other priorities that you're going to hear me talk about pushing into a little bit this year will be looking at increasing STEAM learning opportunities for students. We want to take that visioning we're going to do in STEAM learning and actually expand that into creating a broader vision of success for our students. And do some community work around that. And we're also looking at how we can increase representation in our advanced placement courses and other advanced coursework that we offer at the high school, and open up access to those classes and remove some barriers that we currently have in place. And then also looking at some of our grading and assessment practices that could lead to disparities in terms of who gets access to coursework. You've seen this language before. We've left this the same. This is our first goal around social emotional learning, but essentially what we want to improve is social emotional, mental, and behavioral health outcomes for students by shifting our environments, practices, and supports so that students can more effectively access learning and cultivate constructive relationships. You can see some of the short-term outcomes that we want for this. We also have some longer-term outcomes. We would love to think about how we can shift to thinking about student outcomes in this area. But at this point, we have not seen a coalescing of evidence-based screening and assessment. And so we're hesitant to move too quickly to try and measure student outcomes, lest we're going to end up actually, measuring things that, in a year or two prove really not to be as significant as what they once were. So we're going to take that piece slowly. But in the short term, we want to really create a short and long-term strategic plan for how we want to approach social emotional learning and mental and behavioral health, and make sure that aligns with the MTSS work that we're doing. We want to make sure that we have a common understanding of what social emotional learning is, separately from mental and behavioral health supports. So we can really think about how that progresses across grade levels and think in terms of skill development. We want to make sure that we're supporting our educators and our staff to respond to the needs of our students, and then we want to increase ways that students can access mental health interventions. So you heard about a lot of this work at the last meeting, so you're hearing about the goal after that because we just had too much scheduled for one meeting last time. Goal number 2, this is where we're trying to shift a little bit to, be accountable to some outcomes as a group, but I'll talk a little bit more about what we're trying to do. We want to increase the number of students who are on a pathway to proficiency in literacy and math through implementation of our MTSS model. And so what we really want to do is, in the iReady screener, there's 2 types of measurements that we can look at. One is achievement level, but the other is growth. And as a leadership team, we really talked about what was valuable to us, and it wasn't so much about where a student is achieving in a given year, although that's important, but what we wanted to look at to measure our progress was how much are we helping students grow. And so there's 2 growth methods that we can look at in iReady, and I'll talk about, the concern about only using one screener and yet the need to kind of focus in on one data element at the same time. But in iReady, you can have what's called typical growth, or you can have what's called stretch growth. Typical growth is based on a student's initial screening performance. Where would you expect them to land at the end of that school year for most students? Stretch growth is how much growth should a student show in a subject area in order to, over time and multiple years, actually show advancement or the ability to catch up or continue to grow faster than what would typically be expected. And so what we really want to hone in on for this coming year is students who on our iReady screener, particularly in early literacy, but also in kind of grades 4 through 8 mathematics, who is in the fall, as we do some screening, coming up 1 or more grade levels below what we would expect, and how can we help them move faster toward their stretch growth goal so that over time they're on a path to achieving proficiency. We know that you can't solve all of that in 1 year's time. There's no educator in the world that can necessarily just close gaps within 1 year. But what we want to do is get more and more of our students reaching their stretch growth goals because we believe that's the path to proficiency. We've talked a little bit about the importance of 3rd grade literacy rates. There are all sorts of adverse consequences associated with students who are not literate by the end of 3rd grade and reading at grade level. That's certainly an area. I put in here some data just so you could see. We don't have large numbers, but for example, in 3rd grade, this is last year's data that you see up here, and I apologize for the small numbers. It just tried to fit it on one slide. And in 3rd grade, the placement in the fall that students could have, they could, in the fall, place at mid or above grade level. And you could see in 3rd grade last year, we had 167 students in 3rd grade across the district place mid or above grade level for 3rd grade at the beginning of the year. We had 86 students who were early on grade level. We had 56 students who were 1 grade level below, and 39 students 2 grade levels below, and 11 students 3 or more grade levels below. And that's across the district for our 3rd graders who we screened in the fall of last year. Of those numbers, 51% of students who were at or above the benchmark achieved their stretch growth goal, so about half. That dipped to about 40% who were early on grade level. And where you expect students to be is early on grade level at the beginning of the year or possibly 1 grade level below. Those are typical normal places for students to be assessed at the beginning of the year. I think particularly coming out of a pandemic, we would expect to see these numbers. Some good news for us was about 60% of our students who were 1 or more grade levels below actually met their stretch growth. So that's some good news. About 44% of students who were 2 or more grade levels below also met stretch growth goals, and only 9% of students who were 3 grade levels below met that stretch growth goals. We want to really look hard at those 3 categories that I just mentioned, basically all of our students who are 1 or more grade levels below. And what we want to do is continue every year to increase the number of students in those categories who can get to that stretch growth goal, which again places them on that path to proficiency that we want to see. We will also later in the year share some of our mathematics numbers, but I wanted to include this as a sample for you so you knew kind of how we were using the data. I want to pause too and say, you know, we're using a single data source here because at some point we have to try measuring something. Looking at student growth is much more complex than a single data point. We use multiple assessments to measure student growth. An incredibly important measure of student growth is teacher anecdotal information that they provide us. That's not something that we're going to be able to share with the committee widely. It's not an easily aggregatable data source. But it's incredibly important to how we think about kids and how we move kids. But in addition, for early literacy, we use DIBELS as a screener. As I said, in addition to iReady, we're using Heggerty. So it's really multiple data points that we're using internally to measure, but as we report out to you, we're just picking a single one for some level of simplicity to what we're trying to do. It's complex, but I just want to kind of show you our thinking. So this year's goal academically is really looking at literacy and math and trying to move more students toward getting to their stretch growth. Sorry I wanted to be clear about that because it was a little more complex and it's not a way that we've looked at this with this group before. And then goal number 3, you will see this is improving students, staff, and family sense of belonging by strengthening school culture and climate, diversifying the professional staff, and intentionally implementing culturally responsive instructional practices and materials. As I read that out loud, I want to just note that we are not accidentally implementing culturally responsive instructional practices and materials. It's intentional. I will probably take that word out in the final version. Some of the outcomes you can see listed below. I'm not going to go through the whole list tonight because we have done this before with you, but I just want to point you to some of that important work that we're doing. Some other initiatives that we have going, and we're not going to report out on these to the same extent that you will see information on goals come back later in the year. But we are continuing to evaluate course levels at the high school. What we want to look at is the appropriateness of our current course leveling structure at the high school and examine how our students are selecting courses and patterns that we may see come up. Look at how our students are meeting success in our current structure, but also in some of the heterogeneously grouped environments that we have in the school, and then really be able to come up with a more coherent plan moving forward for how we want to approach course levels at the high school. This is not the same as saying we're eliminating levels. Our goal going into this is not elimination of levels, but simply to evaluate what we have and think about how we can help more students continue to access enriching, rigorous coursework as they progress through the high school. We also want to engage in a STEAM visioning process, and so Deb and I have been working with Battelle for Kids, which is a national organization that does a lot of work around visioning and putting visioning processes together. But we want to bring together a cross-section of our students, educators, families, professionals, and some university partners that we've made over the last year, and creating a real vision for STEAM education that looks back to the prior work we've done around STEAM, but also thinks about what our STEAM vision could be in engaging kids through grade 12. There's a lot of areas that we have some smatterings of, but we could really capitalize on. Coding and computer science is a huge field that we see students going into, and in Massachusetts schools is being vastly underrepresented. That could be an opportunity. There's certainly opportunities in design and engineering that we could be pursuing with kids as well to provide additional hands-on learning experiences as they progress through the grades. And we started talking about that with the Minuteman program a couple of meetings ago, as well in some of the life sciences. These are going to be major career fields for people and students to be able to go into that are going to be profound in terms of the impact that they have on our world. And so I think I would like to see us think more about how we can get kids really hands-on, engaged, and excited about the types of STEAM coursework that they take right from middle school all the way through high school, but it has to start with what we're doing in elementary school and have a pattern that builds. And as I've talked to you before, I think there's some opportunities to work with university partners and think about ways that our high school students could start earning credits at the college level while they're taking high school coursework toward that end. So that's a process we want to talk about. We're hoping to launch as soon as we see a proposal back from Battelle for Kids. So, this is probably in the next couple of months, you're going to see this work launch. And then that, when it's complete, will lead into a broader visioning process and developing a broad portrait of a graduate to really bring together our community with a focus on our kids and thinking about what is the type of knowledge and skills and habits of mind that kids are going to need to leave the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District after 13 or 14 or maybe even 15 years and go out into the world and continue to be the leaders that we know our graduates are. And so we want to think deeply about that and how our world is shifting on a daily basis and what our students are going to need. So that work we'll start organizing the work in the second half of this year, but likely the actual visioning process will take place next fall. But we still will have significant work to do this spring to get ready. So in terms of my own goals for the evaluation process, I'm proposing 4 for you. I'm proposing a student learning goal, which would be our district goal number 2, around the MTSS process and literacy and mathematics. I am also proposing the first and third goals as additional district goals. So you'll see all 3 district goals. And then I'm proposing 1 additional professional practice goal. And I'm thinking about the impact of the pandemic in the last few years, and I'd really like to think about all of the ways that we're engaging with our families and our broader community and think about how we can enlist members of the community who may be beyond just the school walls to continue support for the school district and really also help our community develop a broader understanding of the goals. So I really want to focus in on this. I chose not to list all the specific things because I actually think this is about having an overarching goal and then taking advantage of opportunities as they arise. Obviously, we're opening the Boardwalk campus with the grand opening. That's a great community event that can bring people together in a really positive, exciting way. I think that's a great launch. I've also been working with Joni Dean at the high school, and I'm headed to the senior center myself coming up in probably about 3 weeks to just meet with some seniors there. But then a few weeks after that in November, we're actually bringing our seniors on a school bus, a big yellow bus trip from the senior center to the high school, where we're going to bring them on a tour of the high school. We're going to give them a little presentation on some of the work that we're doing, and then we're going to do an hour-long lunch with some of our students and seniors in small groups, just sharing experiences of what school was like then and now. But just trying to make a really fun, educationally relevant experience for both our oldest generation in the community and our youngest generation in the community. And we want to continue to expand and take advantage of opportunities like that throughout the year to just continue to make connections between our community and our schools. So just a little bit of an overview. I thought that would be really relevant coming out of the pandemic and thinking about kind of where we're at as a district. So that's my professional practice goal for the year. So I'm happy to take feedback, comments, questions, and this is a first read of the goals. So any feedback you're giving me on these, I'll think about, and we'll be able to come back and make some revisions and hopefully vote those at the next meeting. This is only the overarching. Obviously, there was a much longer document in your packet that actually detailed all the action steps and other more relevant information.
Amy and then Ben. Hi, Amy.
This is great. I really appreciate, I think it was a very smart move to make your goals the same as the district goals. It's really important. The professional practice piece is very interesting. I'm excited to see, I think that is key to, it's really key to creating strong relationships with our broader community, with our, these are people that support us. They pay taxes so that we can have this amazing school district, and it's high time that we bring them in and really let them know kind of what's going on. So I'm excited about that. I wanted to say, if you could go back the initiatives. Love that you're doing the high school course levels. I don't, I've been outspoken about how frustrating I find it that there are these arbitrary prerequisites, and students aren't really able to stretch. If they're extremely interested in the subject, they're not able to kind of stretch to a higher level class because they think they can do it because their previous grades, weren't, 95%. I mean, yeah. And yeah, the STEAM visioning too, it's cool. Really excited about the STEAM visioning.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment on looking at the course levels at the high school. So we actually, working through Joni and with some of the department leaders, we actually have a group of teachers spending the entire year really looking at this structure. And they are content teachers who are taking time to think about the instructional practices that want to shift over time to support looking at course levels. They're also looking at some of the student data around meeting success. In particular, we are looking a lot at our freshman environmental science pathway this year and how students are meeting success, because as you remember last year, as we shifted that, we responded to community feedback about wanting to make sure students who were accelerated still had opportunities, even if we were not offering biology freshman year, by eliminating all prerequisites for students going in. So we have an unleveled version of environmental science. We have an honors pathway for an environmental science, or students could take an advanced placement level of environmental science their freshman year. And there are no prerequisites for any of them. Any student can take whatever course that they feel is right for them. So we're excited to watch how that plays out over the course of the year, collect some data on it, and then be able to use that experience to inform some future thinking.
Real quick, that's great. That makes me really happy. I mean, I never understood how a student does in junior high science, how that translates into how they're going to do in environmental science, or how they do in biology, and how that's going to translate into how they're going to do in chemistry. It just didn't make sense to me. So thank you.
Hi, Ben.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, Peter, thank you for all the effort and work that you put into this presentation. Particularly want to touch upon the STEAM visioning. I know from my vantage point in terms of working with outside vendors and whatnot, we're seeing a real crunch in trying to get qualified, individuals to do the work of engineering, within the communities that I serve outside here. So I'm really excited about this, articulating a vision for STEAM engagement through grade 12, because I think in coming years that will pay off dividends within the workforce. So again, thank you so much for putting such time and effort into that slide.
Sure. I think one of the things I think most about AB is, this community has long led the state and nation around thinking around science education in STEM fields. But I'm also keenly aware that in 2022, what is a STEAM field is shifting on a daily and weekly basis in terms of the expertise that students need. And what we're seeing is both employers and colleges very rapidly changing how they're teaching and what employees need to be able to do. And it really necessitates students having a lot of hands-on experience. They're thinkers, they're doers, they're able to be creators, they are able to work in teams, they're able to collaborate, both in person and remotely across cultures. And a lot of that has to be thought about in terms of how we vision for STEAM. And I'm hopeful that the process we have, and in particular, I want to get our students involved in telling us the types of experiences they're excited about and that they're hoping to get, because I think the more we can elevate student voice in terms of how we're approaching our vision for education, the more likely we are to remain relevant, not only from what the past is, but also, 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello, Madam Chair. Thank you for the microphone. Peter, I recognize we're talking about academics, but one of the points you mentioned was the profile of a graduate, which I think is a really nice way of thinking about it. And a portion of that is more than just academics in a traditional sense, and the idea that the whole person. It's a lot easier to look at the quantifiable results we get from test scores, but how do we also encourage the character building opportunities around fun or activities or interests that go beyond the structure of academics. And I recognize we're here talking academics, but one of the things that I didn't see up there, aside from character building, is around non-academic activities that may be a part of the school in ways to be able to encourage that aspect of the people. And to talk also about what you just said, how businesses are changing. I know how the creative is being brought into so much of activity in the business world right now. I know a company that, as part of the interview process, will walk through a museum with candidates just to get their reaction of the world around them. And I wonder if there's a potential for a lens around that inside this as well.
I'll go back to this slide before I scribble all over it and then repeat myself 3 times. Really at the center of this is this idea of belonging, relationships, climate, and culture. And I think, you know, when I hear the word fun, I have a couple different reactions. One is we should never be talking about is it academic or is it fun? Because anything that is academic can be a heavy lift and be fun, right? And that's called engagement and doing that. But beyond that, I hear what you're saying, and we want to continue to build the climate and culture of our schools through a variety of activities for students so that they feel connected to the school. And I think, you know, a particular lens that we want to continue to have is, are we creating activities where all of our students feel connected to our schools? Because when we talk about, you know, all, some, many, most, you know, things like that, that can be challenging. And so, you know, we're certainly going to talk about the types of, you know, fun activities that we do over the next several years, but we need to continue to have fun activities for kids and for families because, you know, we actually, Deb, Jen Faber, our Director of DEI, and I just went to a fantastic workshop around, you know, building out a framework for equity. And, you know, one of the things we need to remember is the number 1 factor to close the achievement gap is actually families. The number 2 factor is schools and teachers. And so we have to make sure we're continuing to strengthen the connection that our families have with the schools. Part of that's engagement through fun activities. Part of it's also making sure families know what's happening in school.
And I do not disagree with you at all about the idea of engagement, engaging activities being fun, but there is a difference between eating a really great plate of broccoli and a really good cookie. And I think that it's worthwhile for us to think about how we can provide some opportunities for cookies instead of what we're doing.
Absolutely. And then there's some spinach brownies that can be absolutely fantastic too.
Whatever you choose to put in your brownies is entirely up to you.
Okay. I'm not gonna ask anything about that.
Hello, Tessa. Woo, we getting punchy. It's 9 o'clock at night, y'all.
Okay, I'll be really quick. But in terms of like the building this team out and the courses at the high school and what you and Andrew were just sort of loosely talking about is that literally you have to wait until you're a junior or senior to take any academic course that even resembles fun at the high school. And I think that that's where we're really missing an opportunity. Like, my kid now is taking bioethics. She's taking psychology of the good life. You know, like, these are classes that are super interesting. When you talk to a freshman about what they're taking name a science class, they're taking algebra or geometry, they're taking, you know, world history, you know, I mean, and they're taking English 1. Oh, and she's taking Art of the Truth, a journalism class. So I guess I just wish, you know, you get to take these classes if you survive the rest of high school. Woohoo, you're a senior, you can take these fun classes. And they're plenty of work, but, you know, it's something that's engaging to come home and talk about. And I just wish, you know, I don't know how much more fun they have to have. These are academic classes, you know? I mean, I think that up until you get to be a senior, it's like there's your electives, which are the fun part of the day, and then there's your academic classes. And, you know, particularly things like math, we don't have any fun math classes unless you're into computers. And if you're not into computers, then forget about it. Like, the only math class you can take that is outside of the traditional whatever is either statistics or consumer math. So how exciting are those things? Not really. And I understand we have to teach academics. I totally get it. But I think that there are ways to make high school more palatable for so many more kids, to make it more engaging.
So I love statistics. And I do agree with you. I think, my own experience, as an educator and as a parent and now as a superintendent, and still an educator, hopefully, I think what we've seen is a shift with high school students, similar to college. Like, we don't, because then they repeat the same thing at college, that you have to get through 2 years of general education classes before you get into your major. But kids are much more connected to content if they feel like it can engage them in something of interest to them. And when we disconnect content from the interest that our students show, that's where I think we see a divide. And so, I think you can teach relevant biology, chemistry, and physics standards through forensic science, for example. And kids love a forensic science class, and yet they're still getting the same standards and content, but it's delivered in a different format. That's not to say we're ever going to fully replace the need for biology, chemistry, physics, because kids need a solid foundation in those classes as well. So to me, it's about an and statement of how do we make sure that kids have all the foundational and content knowledge that they need coming out of high school to be successful beyond, and how do we make sure that they also have opportunities throughout the day to have courses that they feel are highly engaging from, the time that they're in preschool to the time that they finally walk out the doors at the end of high school, whenever that is for them. So that would be a goal that I have for us as a district.
Hello, Adam.
Thank you. All right, Peter. Can you advance just one hit of the button? Okay, good work. Next advancement. Oh, that looks like more work to do. One more hit. Oh, gosh. You got a lot on your plate. Can you do it one more, please? We've got 7 items here that you're focusing on. And I think we learned last year that, I know where you're going, that we're not putting as much effort into the blue ones as we are into the green, the red, and the orange. But there's a lot there. And then if you heard the feedback from around this table, most of the feedback was around the blue items. The high school, the leveling at the high school, getting ready for Portrait of a Graduate, and the STEAM program. So, my fear is that similar to last year, when you said to this committee, here are 6 things, which 3 do you want me to do? And we said, yes, please. You've come again with 3 things that you were going to focus on, and then 4 other things that are additional initiatives, and the committee has said, yes, please. So my feedback is both to our committee and to Peter that the 3 goals that you've set for yourself are big, ambitious goals, and there's a lot of work to get done there. And I think that we all need to be focusing on those because that's what we've agreed over and over again are the most important. And while the other things are also important and need to be addressed, right? We've got to get our high school reaccredited in the coming years. Those things are important. Those shouldn't be the focus, we have to have our broccoli before we have our cookies to carry the metaphor through. So that's my first comment. And my second comment is about the outcomes that you've listed in some of these goals. So I hear what you're saying, particularly around goal number 1, that there aren't necessarily measurable outcomes there yet. Goal number 2 has some great measurable outcomes because we have albeit somewhat flawed method of collecting that information. We have a touch point that we can get directional information on. I struggle with the outcomes in goal 3 because the outcomes use words like continuation, establishment, coordination, continuation. To me, I don't feel we've gotten to the point where we've even started to talk about what are the points that we're going to measure to know if we're reaching the outcomes. And so, I would put it to you to sort of think about that and think about the outcomes in terms of we may not be at the point yet to provide great measurable outcomes like you have in goal 2, but I also don't see in here something that says we're going to get to the point this year where we can baseline it. And so I think that that's something that might be helpful. And I think, one of those things that's striking me as a reference point for that is as we look at, I'm going to bring this all the way back to the MOU, as we looked at the MOU, we said, well, what is the data around our interactions with SROs? We don't have the data, or it's not easily accessible, so it's hard to make decisions when you don't have that data. So I'm so happy. Let me close with a compliment, which is I'm so happy that we're in October 6th and we're talking about this now, and we're not talking about all of the other things that have kept us from being able to have this conversation early. And so I really look forward to continuing this conversation and evolving this and making sure that we're focusing on the things that we all agree are most important, and that we've got data points with which we can follow the directionality of the efforts.
So I'll comment on the second half of that first. With regard to measurement, it's actually buried in the document, but we are implementing climate and culture surveys now, district-wide, and we're doing those direct through students, so we actually can break that down based on our demographics, and really start to understand how students and families are reporting connectedness with the district. So we're really looking to measure two things. One is students' sense of belonging and families' sense of belonging in the district. And then the second, quite honestly, our educators' sense of belonging in the district as well. And we started doing that a little bit last year. This is the year now we're really piloting those on a 2-time-a-year basis. The other thing that we can measure through those surveys is making sure that our students can identify trusted adults within the school, and that each student has a trusted adult. And so those are really, quite honestly, it's not only an SEL measure, but it's actually a culturally responsive practice measure. Those are the two things we want to key in on initially through those surveys. So that is there. It's just in a 13-page document in 9 font. Because there's a lot going on. So we're certainly headed in that direction, so I appreciate that. Going back to why we separated out goals and priorities, the goals all have fairly linear processes outlined with measurable action steps that we're accountable to make sure every action step does. The priorities are general target areas that we're going to take advantage of as we go. And if you look at, and I've certainly thought about this at my level, who's involved in some of the heavy lifting around this. We're at a point now with MTSS that, thinking about multi-tier systems of support, our literacy and mathematics outcomes, and, evidence-based screening and assessment. The majority of that work is actually multiple years in the making and is focused on elementary schools. And eventually it will build out through the district. And to some extent it's in the junior high, but it's really an elementary focused, whereas looking at representation in coursework and grading and assessment practices is really a high school level focus. Similarly, when we think about kind of the work around culturally responsive practices, that's everyone. And certainly the hiring processes is a district and administrator focus to make sure that we're doing well with our hiring processes. And SEL is everyone. So there's lifting for everyone on a couple things and lifting for some on others, if that makes sense. So we've thought about that. And then in terms of some of the STEAM visioning, that really is a visioning team that comes together to do that work, which then lays out more of a plan for the long term, if that makes sense. So it's not, that's the fun work that we get to do when we do that. And then we get to the action steps that come later. And then Portrait of a Grad is really thinking about what do we need to do this year to gear up for next. And so it's not a heavy lift initially, and it actually will probably use the same organization we're going to use for the STEAM visioning. So it's actually just a process, one rolls into the next. So we have thought about some of the lift on that, and then some of the other work, particularly around thinking about how our college and university partners can help leverage opportunities for kids now. I've been working on that in the background for a year anyway. So it's really just thinking about how that can come to fruition and start to tie into this in a more tangible and concrete way for our kids. But
Okay,
so hope that's helpful.
So, was that satisfying for you? I'm just curious, because it was meaty critique. So now I kind of want to ask you because we're going to go into a second read, if you would like the superintendent to either boil down or do some cutting or do something else, or was that answer around delegation? That's what he just done said. Was that good for you?
I think it's clear that Peter has thought deeply about how he's going to get these things done. I think for me, the challenge is 9 months from now when we need to write an evaluation. The items in blue aren't necessarily in Peter's goals for the superintendent. And so they may be great, but I'm going to need evidence on district goals 1, 2, and 3. And I also don't want my peers at the table to say, yeah, but did we get a new STEAM program yet this year? I mean, I think it's important to just sort of set the expectation that goals 1, 2, and 3 with the outcomes that are laid out here and the measurements are going to be what we get evidence on, and the other ones are either on deck for goals for next year or activities for next year, or are nice to haves. But there's just a lot going on, and I think from an evaluator standpoint, I want to know very clearly what you want me to evaluate you on, and expect to see, you know, the measurements along the way to support that.
Okay, so it's going to be Rebecca, and then Andy, and then Dessa.
For goal number 1, I wanted to ask if you're considering surveying the students to find out, because I would think, you know, mental, behavioral health, social, emotional stuff, a lot of that is subjective, and you'd want to hear from them. And then I have a second part to my question after you answer that.
Yeah, we actually tried piloting that a little bit. I mean, when we talk about the culturally responsive practice and the sense of belonging and trusted adult, that is definitely something that students are included on those surveys. We tried surveying them around social emotional learning skills and kind of the CASEL framework last year. You know, it either didn't tell us anything interesting, or some kids that maybe it was pretty prone to misidentifying skill sets, and we had some kids who maybe underestimated their skills or grossly overestimated, and we're just not sure that screener was really going to do it. So I haven't found a good screener or survey to actually assess skills, but sense of belonging and relationships, 100% yes, students.
And then the second part that I was going to comment on is just about STEAM in general. I'm really glad that this is a focus. Obviously, these are skills that are in demand. And I'm glad that art has been added to it. As an English major, I would like to point out that all of the skills that you identified as being ones that workplaces are looking for are what you get with an English degree. You work with groups, you know, you're culturally sensitive, you do public speaking, critical thinking, you're exposed to a lot of different cultures. These are all very much in demand, and I think that we tend to not create stigma, but we definitely aren't driving kids in that direction, when I think maybe we should.
Shout out to the humanities. Yeah. Hi, Andrew.
Hi. Yeah, I think going back to the spirograph slide, there's a lot of opportunity for consolidation, and a lot of the actions that you've got, and they'll yield the results that will align with what you're doing. So I get what you're saying. When you look at that, there are a ton of words up there, and trust me, I know walls of words. You've never seen my emails. But in software, there's a framework where there are enabling technologies that surface capabilities that then can be focused on use cases. And ultimately, it ends up being like the Taco Bell product strategy, where you've got 7 ingredients and 200 things on the menu. You got 200 things on your menu, but that's built by the 6 or 7 ingredients that you're working on. So I think you've got it okay, but I think just it might make more sense to reorganize the way you're sharing that so that it doesn't seem as overwhelming for the activities that are going to be had, inclusive of some of the delegation you're talking about.
Shout out to our 20s when we could eat Taco Bell. Hi, Tessa.
Hi. Can you go back to this paragraph thing? So I was just gonna say that, you know, I totally respect Adam's criticism, especially since he's been away for like a week, and that was really impressive. Like, obviously you did your homework, so way to go. Is that, you know, belonging in relationships and climate and culture really does have a lot to do with some of those other things that are the minor goals, at least if we're thinking about high school, right? Which is where I feel like we have the smallest number of kids feeling like they really belong, only because of a matter of that's the age, right? Like, you're really looking for yourself and all of that. So I see it as, I totally hear what you're saying, and I respect, you know, what happened last year, but I do think that some of those things certainly build upon that idea of that goal. Like, I think that they're integral parts of making that goal happen. So, you know, I would look forward to seeing, I guess, the action steps and the outcomes that are expected and everything else. But, you know, I think the one thing that we've seen over and over again, and I just don't
I don't really want it to get lost. I want it to be more impactful is the triangle. We've been talking about, you know, culturally responsive practice and hiring more educators like ad nauseum for like the last 5 years. So I think that if that's going to be a goal, like we really, really, really want outcomes. And I understand that that's one of the hardest ones because we don't necessarily have, we're not in control of all of those things. I hear that, but it is the biggest one of your little spirograph drawings there. So I just hope that what I'm looking for, at least as an evaluator, is like finally getting that, you know, making some real progress on that. I mean, we have made progress. I just mean, you know, we started our school year with lots of not that. So I just hope that we make some real progress there.
Yeah, and I also want to just caution realism on that too, because not that you don't have realism, but I think, you know, there's not going to be any silver bullet coming that's going to solve, you know, racism, culturally responsive, feelings of lack of being included, things like that. And if we are not doing the same work 10 years from now, we actually won't get to the goal, right? This is work that, you know, every year you do it, it should be very, very similar. It has to keep building on itself and going deeper each time. So, you know, it's not one of those things where you are going to see us checking off initiatives and we're done, right? Because whatever you got to now has to get better. And so it's iterative, and that's, I think, the approach, which is why you see a lot of the words continue, refine, go deep, you know, things like that.
And I hear that, and I just think in the presentation of it, I just hope that, you know, you want us to be as interested in that goal as we are in, you know, STEAM education and, you know, all those other things. But I just think, I don't know, I feel like it's been, that's not on you. I mean, in the whole community, I just feel that it's been kind of, it's become a part of our just like everyday language and we just talk about it. But I just hope that, you know, whatever the measurable outcomes are for this year, you know, we really drive down how we are continuing to make the iterative changes, you know.
No, and I'll be honest, I think actually the dirty little secret to all of this, that everything up here is actually culturally responsive practice. Everything, including the STEAM learning, engagement, everything else, because if our students are spending, you know, 90 to 95% of their school day in a class learning academics, that's where the work has to be done, right? And so, you know, all work is culturally responsive work. All work is about equity. All work is about inclusion. And there's just, at times, we have to have, you know, shine different lenses and different lights on that work because there's some specialized skills and skill sets that have to get developed in the path.
Equity is the show, something else is the meat, something spices. We're going to take this all the way. Are there any, see what I did there? Thank you. It's 9 o'clock at night, y'all. How are we feeling? Do we? Yes.
Like, we need tacos. Where's the dinner?
Hungry.
I'm really
hungry.
sorry.
I
I can
will say
only do
hungry.
so much in this position. Are we, we're all set? We're ready to send Peter back to do a little iteration and then get with the second read? All right, brilliant. Thank you very much, y'all. All right, thank you, Peter. All right, we are moving on to ongoing business. Here is our consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote unless any member would like to hold an item for discussion and a separate vote. I will read each item name, and if any member would like it to be held, please say hold. Members do not have to have attended a meeting to vote on the minutes. Item 1, approval of the ABRSC meeting minutes of 9/22/22. Item 2, approval of donation of 1,500 acrylic paint canvases, value $6,240, and 750 blue light glasses, value $2,250 from Krospoint Incorporated. Item 3, approval of $5,000 check to Community Education Summer Day Program from Danny's Place. Item number, so do I have to stop now with the holder? I just keep going? Okay, great. And then item number 5, annual reauthorization of official junior high organized activities. The following item has been held and will be voted separately. That would be item number 3.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, brilliant. Amy, would you like to explain the reason for holding this item?
I sit on the
Item
board of Danny's Place, so I need to abstain from it, and I didn't want to abstain from everything.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, good. So then now we are all voting. Oh, Adam, hi.
I would like to make a comment since Amy held. If you notice between this $5,000 donation to the Community Ed Summer Program and on September 8th, there was another $9,000 to the Community Ed Summer Education Program. I just want to highlight the great work that the Community Ed team is doing and the great work that the Summer Day program provides for our families in our district. And these are great donations, so I just wanted to express my gratitude to both the donors and the team in community education for going out and getting such great funds to support the program.
Thank you, Adam. All right, so I think I need a motion to approve that, yeah?
Oh yeah, move to approve.
All right, that was Adam. I'm going to give that to Ben. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Aye with gratitude. Any oppose? Any abstentions? Yes. Okay, thank you so much. So Amy abstained, otherwise that was unanimous. All right, I think we're all set with consent agenda. Are there any subcommittee or member reports? Hi, Ben.
I wasn't going to actually do the pool subcommittee, but since we have a report, might as well do it. Excuse me. On September 20th, 2022, a survey was sent out to the community, which was open through October 4th, 2022. The survey was sent out directly to all current faculty and staff of AB, all current AB students in grades 7 through 12, strike that, all current parents, guardians of AB students. The alumni email address is shared with the high school, approximately 7,000. In addition, it was also shared on the district's Twitter page, along with mailing lists of the town managers for Acton and Boxborough. After the poll closed, the survey results totaled 663 submissions, of which 583, or 88%, expressed overwhelming support for naming the pool after Coach Jeff Johnson. The balance was 9% did not submit a comment, 1.6% expressed opposition to naming the pool after Coach Johnson or any other person, and 1%, 7, submitted a comment unrelated to the topic, i.e. meow. Excuse me. Within the 583 comments supporting the naming of the pool after Coach Johnson, comments range from a single word entry such as yes and definitely to a significantly longer entries that provided detailed narratives in support of Mr. Johnson's credentials and impact to the community. Moving forward, we will be meeting as a subcommittee on October the 12th for further discussion of this, and we will be bringing this for open discussion. Subsequently, I think it's at the October 20th meeting. Yes, I didn't have the date right in front of me. That is all I have for my report, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Blumenthal. Any others? Okay, hi, Adam.
Hi, just a quick report. On the 21st of September, I joined the SEPAC meeting's first meeting in person, and there was a lively discussion at that meeting, as Amanda alluded to, around the MOU for the school resource officer. So I would expect that the policy subcommittee will get some feedback directly from the SEPAC regarding their thoughts about the MOU. That's it.
Okay, so just to reiterate, we are going to do a public hearing on the SRO MOU on December the 1st. So if y'all have comments, y'all in the public, we are going to do something else. Please plan to come to that meeting and deliver your comments. Any other member reports? Hi, Andy.
Hi, very briefly, the Health Insurance Trust met on September 29th, and we had a lovely discussion regarding the provision of PBM to the community. That's the prescription benefits management. We will have another presentation regarding that at the next meeting, and then we'll make a decision as to which way to go.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. All right, we're all set. Okay, brilliant. Here we go. Statement of warrants, recommendations to approve. Who's got the warrants? Anybody? Hi, Adam. Oh, okay.
Well, I was shirking, so I thought maybe I should do it, but feel free.
Adam's got his mic on. Thank you, Adam.
I move that the school committee vote to approve the following warrants totaling $6,140,542.18. AP vendor warrants as follows: 23-006A dated 9/15/2022 in the amount of $520.50. 23-006 dated 9/15/2022 in the amount of $1,896,763.47. Payroll vendor warrant as follows: 23-006 PR dated 9/22/2022 in the amount of $1,227,036.78. And payroll warrant as follows: P2306 dated 9/22/2022 in the amount of $3,016,221.43.
Okay, so Adam moved and Amy seconded. All those in favor? Aye. And any opposed to paying bills? Okay, and no abstentions. Very good. All right, so that passed unanimously. Peter, would you like to highlight anything before we adjourn?
There's an enrollment report for September in your packet, if you are looking for that.
Please come to the Boardwalk campus event on the 15th, and then go to Diwali Fest afterward. Like, go to both. They're both going to be awesome. Go to both. And then we have a community coffee, Peter and I, that will be virtual in the morning on the 26th. Y'all.
Move to adjourn.
We're gonna give that to Tessa, and we're gonna give that to it to Ben. And all those in favor? Aye. All right, thank y'all. Have a good night.